Like, subscribe, and stay with us until the end, because this is not just a sports story, it's a human one. Like and subscribe if you believe that even legends deserve to be understood beyond their victories. For most of the world, Serena Williams has always represented power in its purest form. She was never just a tennis player. She was a force that bent the sport around her will. From the moment she stepped onto professional courts, she carried an aura of inevitability, as if defeat itself had to work harder when facing her. Fans learned to expect comebacks, dominance, and miracles forged through discipline and pain tolerance that bordered on superhuman. Serena did not simply win matches. She survived eras, shattered expectations, and rewrote limits that were never meant to include her. Strength became her identity, her shield, and her language. But strength, when worn for too long, can quietly become a burden. What the public rarely considers is that the same mentality that builds champions can also trap them. Serena was trained to endure, to push, to silence discomfort, and keep moving forward no matter the cost. Over decades, that habit became instinct. And instincts are hard to question. This story is not about trophies or rankings. It is about what happens when a woman who has been strong her entire life finally encounters something that strength alone cannot fix. It is about vulnerability, entering a life built on invincibility, and how even the most powerful figures must eventually listen when their bodies and minds ask for something different. For decades, Serena Williams trained her body as if it were an instrument that existed solely to obey. Pain was never an enemy. It was a variable to be managed. Injuries were obstacles, not warnings. From sore muscles to serious physical setbacks, everything was treated as something temporary that could be pushed through with the right mindset and enough work. This philosophy served her well in a sport that demands relentless repetition and psychological warfare. Serena learned early that hesitation cost matches, and slowing down meant falling behind. So she learned not to slow down. What made her legendary was not that she avoided pain, but that she normalized it. Over time, this normalization blurred the line between resilience and neglect. Long before fans noticed any visible decline, Serena was already dealing with private struggles that could not be solved by training harder. Migraines followed her through much of her adult life, often dismissed as ordinary headaches because acknowledging them fully would have meant confronting limits. These episodes affected her energy, her focus, and her emotional balance, but she kept going. When tennis filled every hour of her life, symptoms could be outrun. But as years passed and competition slowed, the body began demanding attention it had long been denied. This was no longer about toughness. It was about listening, something Serena had never been taught how to do. Retirement is often portrayed as relief, especially for athletes whose bodies have absorbed years of strain. But for Serena Williams, stepping away from tennis did not bring immediate peace. Instead, it exposed silence. The structure that had guided her since childhood disappeared almost overnight. No daily training schedule, no tournaments to prepare for, no external enemy to focus on. What remained were thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations that had been postponed for years. Serena openly admitted that retirement left her feeling disoriented and emotionally unsettled. For someone whose identity was forged through motion and competition, stillness felt unfamiliar and uncomfortable. In rare moments of honesty, she shared that some days she simply was not okay. That admission mattered. It challenged decades of expectation placed on her to always be strong, always composed, always victorious. Accepting vulnerability proved harder than winning any grand slam. The migraines did not disappear with retirement. In fact, without the adrenaline and distraction of competition, they became more noticeable. Emotional exhaustion surfaced as well. Serena was no longer fighting opponents, but she was fighting herself, her conditioning, her expectations, and the belief that admitting struggle equaled failure. This phase marked a profound shift. Strength was no longer about pushing forward at all costs. It became about acknowledging limits, something she had never been allowed to do before. Health concerns were not new to Serena Williams, but they took on a different weight as she aged and stepped into motherhood. Years earlier, she had survived life-threatening pulmonary embolisms, events that permanently changed her relationship with her body. Those experiences introduced fear into a life once governed by confidence. Motherhood deepened that awareness in ways she never anticipated. Pregnancy, childbirth, and postpartum recovery exposed vulnerabilities that training could not erase. When Serena spoke about her medical experiences, the tone shifted noticeably. Conversations with doctors were no longer about how quickly she could return to form. They were about long-term management, risk reduction, and preserving quality of life. The language of competition disappeared, replaced by the language of caution. This transition forced Serena to confront a painful truth. Her body was no longer something she could command unconditionally. It had its own boundaries now. And respecting those boundaries meant redefining strength itself. For someone raised to believe that stopping was weakness, this was a deeply uncomfortable adjustment. Yet it was unavoidable. The strongest lesson Serena faced was not how to endure pain, but how to protect herself from it. Throughout this transformation, Alexis Ohanian's role shifted quietly but significantly. Early in their relationship, he was known for grand public gestures and open admiration. He celebrated Serena loudly, proudly, and without hesitation. But as health concerns grew and priorities changed, his presence became more understated and intentional. Public appearances became fewer. Interviews focused less on ambition and more on family and stability. Alexis transitioned from being a supportive partner in triumph to a protective presence in uncertainty. This change was not about distance, it was about adaptation. He listened more than he spoke, shielded more than he showcased. Whatever Serena was facing, it was clear that discipline and determination alone would not solve it. For the first time in her life, Serena could not overpower reality through will. And Alexis understood that. His quiet preparation was not for separation, but for acceptance, accepting that life would no longer follow the script they once imagined. Strength had to be redefined for both of them, not as domination, but as care. To understand why this transition is so difficult for Serena Williams, one must understand how she was raised. Born in September 1981, she grew up in an environment where security was fragile and opportunity demanded sacrifice. When her family moved to Compton, survival became a daily concern. Tennis was never introduced as a hobby. It was presented as a way out, a responsibility, a mission. Richard Williams trained his daughters with an intensity rooted in protection and ambition. Emotional expression was discouraged. Pain was normalized. Winning was not celebrated as joy, but as duty. Serena was conditioned to associate endurance with value. From a young age, she learned that discomfort was temporary and weakness was unacceptable. Public courts became classrooms, and hostility became part of the curriculum. Racism, aggression, and pressure were not obstacles to be avoided, but tools meant to harden her. This upbringing created an extraordinary champion. But it also created a woman who struggled to recognize when endurance was no longer healthy. As Serena entered professional tennis at just 14, the lessons of her childhood followed her. She faced older, stronger opponents without complaint. Losses were absorbed silently. Emotional reactions were internalized, not processed. By her late teens, success confirmed the philosophy she had been raised with: resilience works. But success can be deceptive. It rewards behaviors without questioning their cost. Serena learned that pushing through pain delivered results, so she kept pushing. Emotional fatigue became motivation. Physical warning signs became challenges. This mindset produced history, but it also fostered silence. Over time, Serena became skilled at masking discomfort and minimizing symptoms, even as her body accumulated strain. Migraines, exhaustion, and emotional stress were filtered through a belief system that equated stopping with failure. By the time she could no longer ignore these signals, decades had already passed. Unlearning that conditioning proved harder than learning any new skill. Serena and Alexis's love story evolved alongside these challenges. When they met, neither expected their lives to intertwine so deeply. Their relationship began with curiosity and balance. Alexis admired Serena without trying to compete with her strength. She found comfort in someone who did not demand performance. Their early years were marked by joy and momentum, but pregnancy changed everything. Serena's near-death experience following childbirth exposed vulnerabilities that shocked both of them. Medical professionals initially dismissed her concerns. She insisted, saving her own life. Alexis witnessed not a champion, but a woman fighting to survive. That moment reshaped their bond. Love became less about celebration and more about protection. Their priorities shifted permanently. Physically, Serena's body had been absorbing punishment for years. Knee injuries, back pain, shoulder issues, all managed through relentless rehabilitation. She returned repeatedly, often before full recovery, driven by the need to remain dominant. Every comeback reinforced the myth that biology could be outworked. But biology never forgets. Stress, fatigue, and trauma accumulated quietly. Even historic victories masked fragility. Pregnancy, surgery, and later health discoveries served as reminders that limits exist. Retirement did not erase symptoms. It amplified them. Without competition as distraction, Serena had to confront the cost of endurance. When Serena officially stepped away from tennis, she described it as an evolution. Publicly, the language was hopeful. Privately, the adjustment was heavy. Silence replaced noise. Reflection replaced momentum. Serena began speaking more openly about mental health, admitting she was not okay. That honesty mattered. It showed a woman learning to exist without armor. Motherhood grounded her, but fear remained. Health conversations focused on preservation rather than performance. Alexis mirrored this shift, emphasizing family and emotional presence over ambition. This is where the idea of goodbye emerges, not as abandonment, but as acceptance. Alexis was not leaving Serena. He was letting go of a future built on certainty and endless forward motion. Serena was saying goodbye to invincibility, to competition as identity, to silence as strength. The diagnosis, whatever its full extent, demanded humility. This was a battle with no opponent and no victory ceremony. For the first time, Serena Williams allowed herself to stop. Not because she was defeated, but because continuing would cost too much. Stopping became an act of courage. It required undoing a lifetime of conditioning. It required trusting that worth does not depend on endurance alone. This chapter of Serena's life is quieter, but no less powerful. It reflects growth, not decline. It shows that strength evolves, that listening can be braver than pushing, that legends are human before they are icons. Alexis's quiet presence underscores this truth. Love, in its deepest form, adapts. It protects rather than performs. It stays when applause fades. Serena Williams spent her life fighting every battle head-on. This one has no opponent across the net. Do you believe stepping away was the hardest decision of her life, or the bravest? Share your thoughts, and if this story moved you, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.